I've dealt with racism before, quiet glances, assumptions, people crossing the street when they see me walking at night. But nothing quite prepares you for the moment it hits you in a place you didn't expect. A place where you've done everything right. Where your credentials should speak louder than your skin. It was supposed to be a simple flight home. I'm Jordan Miles, CEO of a tech startup that recently closed a multi-million-dollar deal. That morning, I had wrapped up 3 days of back-to-back meetings in New York. Exhausted, but satisfied. I was finally heading back to Atlanta, back to my family, to my son's birthday. I had a first-class ticket in my phone, booked and paid for weeks in advance. Seat 1A. Front of the cabin. I always choose it. No surprises. I got through security with no issue, arrived at the gate with time to spare, and boarded when my group was called early boarding for first class. Everything was routine. Until I sat down. I had just loosened my tie and was calling my assistant to confirm a few last-minute documents, when I noticed her, the flight attendant. Blonde. Straight posture. Cool eyes. She was walking down the aisle toward me with a kind of forced politeness. I could already see the question forming on her face before she opened her mouth. "Excuse me, sir," she said, leaning just slightly toward me. "Are you sure you're in the correct seat?" I turned and looked at her, confused. "Yes, this is 1A. That's what my ticket says." She gave a stiff smile. "Can I see your boarding pass, please?" I handed her my phone. She barely glanced at it. Then another attendant appeared behind her, this one taller, wearing the same icy expression. They whispered to each other, glanced back at me. I felt it, that growing knot in my stomach. It wasn't confusion anymore. It was insult. "This seat has been reassigned," the second one said. "We need you to move to economy until we sort it out." I laughed. Not out of humor. Out of disbelief. "I bought this seat," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's mine. Check your system again." She shook her head. "Sir, please don't make this difficult." That's when the woman in white appeared, a white passenger in a tailored cream suit, heels clicking like she was walking a runway. She looked at me like I was occupying her throne. Not a word was spoken between us. But the way she stood there, silent, watching the flight attendants try to move me, it was clear. She believed I didn't belong there either. She didn't say a word. The white woman in the cream suit just stood there, staring down at me like I was the problem. Not confused. Not concerned. Just expectant, like she was waiting for me to move so the world could resume its natural order. The two flight attendants turned toward her, and suddenly their tone changed. Softer. Sweeter. One of them even smiled. "Ms. Kensington, please give us a moment to sort this out." Kensington. Of course. I looked at the name stitched onto the leather tag of her designer bag, initials monogrammed in gold. She didn't flinch. Didn't look at me. Just stood there like a queen waiting for her servant to step aside. Meanwhile, I was still sitting in 1A, the seat I paid for. The seat I had every legal and moral right to occupy. But somehow, I had become the intruder. "Sir," the taller attendant said again, "please collect your things and let us move you temporarily. We'll sort it out as soon as possible." I stayed still. "No," I said, measured and low. "I'm not going anywhere. You can double-check your manifest, scan my boarding pass again, call your supervisor, whatever you need. But I paid for this seat. And I'm not moving because you've decided I don't look like I belong here." There it was. I had said it. Their faces twitched. Like I had slapped them with a truth they didn't want to hear. The first attendant took a breath and said, "There's no need to make this about race, sir. We're just following protocol." I almost laughed again, but this time, I didn't. I was too tired. Too angry. Too used to hearing those same lines every time something unjust happened to people who looked like me. Behind them, I noticed passengers starting to board. Heads were turning. Some glanced at me, then quickly looked away. A few whispered. One man in a business suit frowned and shook his head slightly, then looked down at his phone. Complicity wrapped in silence. "Sir, if you don't comply," the second attendant added, "we may have to ask security to assist." There it was, the threat. Wrapped in a velvet voice, but sharp as glass. I leaned back in my seat and calmly said, "Then call security." They froze. I could see it, the shift in their posture. They didn't expect that. Maybe they thought I would just get up. That I'd fold under pressure, like so many before me. But I had spent too long working twice as hard to get half the recognition. I wasn't going to move just to make them comfortable. Behind me, a woman's voice suddenly spoke up, from 1B. "He's been sitting there the whole time," she said. "I saw him board before anyone else. Maybe you should double-check your system before asking paying customers to move." For a second, silence fell again. And in that moment, I realized, I wasn't alone. The woman in 1B, I didn't know her, never met her before, but in that moment, her voice felt like a shield. Small, but powerful. The flight attendants didn't thank her. Didn't even acknowledge her. They just looked at each other again, their confidence slipping. I could feel it, the script they'd rehearsed wasn't going the way it usually did. I stayed silent, still calm. My arms were folded now. I wasn't angry the way they wanted me to be. No raised voice. No dramatic gestures. Just stillness and truth. That unsettled them more than any outburst could. Then came the whispering. One of the attendants pulled out her walkie-talkie and turned slightly to the side, speaking into it with low urgency. That's when I started recording. I clicked open my phone, swiped to video, and began documenting. Not for drama. Not for attention. For protection. Because history had taught me that when it's my word against theirs, the benefit of the doubt never lands on my side. The camera was steady in my hand. My voice was clear. "My name is Jordan Miles. I am sitting in seat 1A on flight 362 to Atlanta. I purchased this ticket 2 weeks ago. I am being asked to move despite having a confirmed reservation. No explanation has been given other than a supposed reassignment. I believe this is racially motivated." One of the attendants turned, eyes wide. "Sir, you can't record on board." I looked at her. "Then call the captain." "Because I'm not turning it off." Passengers were definitely watching now. Phones were coming out. I saw a man 3 rows back start filming, too. A woman in business attire across the aisle leaned in and asked quietly, "Is everything okay?" I nodded. "Not yet." Then, finally, a man in a pilot's uniform appeared from the front cabin. His face was unreadable, but his voice was firm. "What seems to be the issue here?" he asked. The lead attendant stepped forward and quickly summarized their version. "A seat conflict, a misunderstanding, a possible duplicate booking." The captain turned to me. "May I see your boarding pass?" I handed him my phone. He looked. Paused. Looked again. Then his brow furrowed. "Your name is Jordan Miles?" "Yes." "You're in 1A?" "Yes." He turned to the attendants, and in a tone colder than the cabin air, said, "He's in the right seat. This is his ticket." Why wasn't this verified before escalating? Neither attendant spoke. The captain narrowed his eyes. "I'll be filing a report. And I want both of you to stay behind after landing." Suddenly, it was quiet again. But not the same kind of quiet. This one felt like the eye of a storm. They didn't speak. The 2 flight attendants stood there, one clutching her tablet, the other still holding the walkie-talkie as if it were a lifeline. But there was nowhere for them to hide now. The captain had spoken, and their confidence was unraveling. I didn't say anything either. I didn't need to. Because when the truth is finally on your side, undeniably, publicly, with proof, silence becomes its own kind of justice. The captain handed my phone back with a simple nod. "Thank you for your patience, Mr. Miles." Then he turned and left the aisle, disappearing back into the cockpit without another word. I looked over at the woman in 1B. She gave me a look, part apology, part solidarity, and a tight-lipped smile that said, "I saw it all." And the woman in the cream suit? Gone. At some point, during the chaos, she must have quietly retreated to her seat. No apology. No acknowledgement. She disappeared like she'd never been part of the problem. That's how it usually goes, doesn't it? Those who benefit from injustice rarely stay long enough to confront it. I sat there, still gripping my phone, adrenaline still in my veins. I wasn't proud. I wasn't smug. I was just tired. Tired of having to fight for basic respect. Tired of proving myself in rooms I paid to be in. Tired of wondering whether my presence will be seen as a threat or a mistake. Eventually, the rest of the passengers boarded. Most didn't say anything. Some gave me a look of sympathy, others glanced and moved on, pretending they hadn't witnessed what just happened. That's the thing about this kind of injustice, people are always more comfortable watching it than addressing it. But the story didn't end there. About 15 minutes later, just before takeoff, I received an email from my assistant. She had forwarded a message from the airline's executive liaison. Apparently, the video I had taken, the one where I calmly stated my name and ticket and documented the incident, had already been uploaded. I hadn't shared it myself, but someone else had. Probably the guy 3 rows back. And it was spreading. Fast. The email read, "Mr. Miles, we are deeply sorry for your experience. We are initiating an internal review and will follow up with you immediately after landing. The conduct of our staff did not reflect our company's values." Sure it didn't. But now, they had to act like it mattered. Because the internet was watching. The plane took off like nothing had happened. No announcements, no apologies, no mention of the scene that had just unfolded in front of half the first-class cabin. Just the usual hum of engines and the artificial calm of altitude. But I felt everything. The cold in my chest. The tension in my jaw. The weight of being composed when you're boiling inside. I sat there quietly, sipping water, watching the clouds through the oval window. And I kept thinking, how many times has this happened to someone who didn't record it? Who didn't have a title behind their name or a following online to back them up? Because the truth is, if I hadn't spoken clearly, if I'd raised my voice even once, I'd be the one escorted off that flight. Another disruptive passenger in a headline nobody would question. I kept the video running for a few more minutes, not for content, but for insurance. Just in case someone tried to rewrite the facts later. Then I turned it off. When the seatbelt sign blinked off, the same flight attendant, the taller one with the silver blazer and frozen expression, came back down the aisle. Her walk was slower now. Controlled. She stopped beside my seat and cleared her throat. "Mr. Miles," she began, "I just wanted to say we're sorry for the misunderstanding earlier." Not "I'm sorry." "We're sorry." Like the apology belonged to some vague department, not to the woman who looked me up and down and tried to erase my seat. I looked at her for a long moment before responding. "Was it a misunderstanding?" I asked, "or an assumption?" Her lips tightened. She didn't answer. "I'm not here for a performative apology," I said. "I just want to fly home without having to prove I belong in a seat I paid for." She nodded once, stiffly, then turned and walked away. That was the last time she looked me in the eye. About halfway through the flight, the captain made an announcement over the intercom. Thanking passengers for their patience and reminding everyone to treat each other with dignity and respect. It was clearly directed at me, dressed in corporate neutrality. But by then, the story was already out there. By the time we touched down in Atlanta, my phone had blown up with notifications. Someone had posted the video to Twitter, a clip of me calmly stating the situation and the attendants insisting I move. Hundreds of thousands of views. Thousands of comments. Hashtags. News outlets tagging me, asking for statements. And buried in the flood of replies, a message from someone I didn't know. A flight crew employee. You didn't deserve that. We've been trying to get rid of people like them for years. Thank you for speaking up. That's when I realized. This wasn't just about me anymore. We landed in Atlanta just after 5 p.m. The sky was golden quiet. I should have been thinking about my son's birthday. About the cake, the music, the look on his face when I walked through the door. But instead, I was still replaying every second of that flight. Every stare. Every word. Every silence. I stepped off the plane last, not by choice, they asked me to wait. The captain wanted a word. I met him near the gate, just past the jet bridge. He stood there with his arms crossed, still in uniform, waiting like someone who had more to say than protocol allowed. "Mr. Miles," he said. I reviewed the footage. So someone on the crew had sent it around already. Maybe it was procedure. Maybe it was damage control. I wanted you to know, he continued, this isn't the first complaint about those two. You just happened to catch it at the right moment. With the right voice. I didn't say anything. Just listened. He nodded slowly, like a man who'd been waiting years for someone else to speak what he couldn't. I submitted a full report to our regional office, he said. There will be consequences. I asked the only question that mattered, will they still be working next week? He shook his head. No. As of this evening, both are suspended. And likely won't be returning. He didn't say it with pride. He said it with resignation. Like someone who knew it was long overdue. I'm sorry you had to be the one to push the button, he added. But I'm glad you did. I walked away with my carry-on, into the terminal, into the noise and lights and crowds. For a second, it almost felt normal again. But something had changed. My phone kept buzzing. News headlines. Interview requests. DMs from people I'd never met, some supportive, some bitter, some saying I was making it about race, others thanking me for holding the line. That phrase stuck with me. Holding the line. Because it wasn't just about my seat. It was about every job interview where I had to wear my best suit to feel safe. Every boardroom where my presence was treated like an exception. Every moment I've had to explain that I earned my place. And now, strangers were sharing my story like a protest chant. At baggage claim, I saw a group of young black men huddled around a phone, watching the video. One of them looked up and did a double take when he saw me. He smiled. Nodded. Respect. That meant more than any apology. The next morning, my inbox was full. Journalists. Lawyers. Activists. CEOs. Strangers. Everyone had something to say, some wanting a quote, others offering their support, a few asking if I planned to sue the airline. But that wasn't my goal. This was never about revenge. It was about something much quieter. Much deeper. The kind of justice that isn't loud or cinematic, just honest. Visible. Felt. I gave one interview. Just one. A podcast hosted by a black entrepreneur I respected. We didn't talk about the airline for long. We talked about leadership. Dignity. What it means to hold space when the world tries to shrink you. I didn't raise my voice, I told him. Not because I was afraid. But because I knew they expected me to. He nodded. You didn't play into the story. You rewrote it. I've thought about that sentence every day since. Because the world is full of stories, unspoken rules about who belongs where. Whose voice matters. Whose anger is tolerated. Whose success is always questioned. And I used to believe that success could protect me. That titles, suits, polite words, and high seats could shield me from ignorance. But no amount of wealth can scrub away the biases that people carry quietly in their bones. What can break them is truth. Not just in words. In action. In documentation. In proof. That video didn't just protect me. It exposed a pattern. And when people see the pattern, they begin to ask questions. Questions turn into pressure. Pressure forces change. That's what matters. 2 weeks later, I received a formal apology letter, hand-signed by the airline's CEO. They offered me a lifetime flight credit and a private meeting to discuss systemic improvements. I declined the credit. But I took the meeting. I sat across from a room of their executives and said the one thing I wish someone had told that flight crew before they tried to remove me. Sometimes, the most dangerous thing you can do to a person is assume. Assume they don't belong. Assume they're a threat. Assume they won't fight back. But I did. And now, every time I step onto a plane, I don't just carry my briefcase and passport. I carry that moment, as a reminder that silence is a luxury we can't afford. Not anymore. Not for us. Not for the next generation.